Good morning. Hi, everybody. It is Friday. Episode number 18 coming at you. Mr. Mike from the Mechanicsburg Learning Center. Animal we're going to talk about today is one that, in my view, was the most popular, most famous dinosaur of all time. Even more famous than Tyrannosaurus Rex. In fact, it was more famous before T-Rex came around and was discovered, and it was when anybody thought about dinosaurs, this would be the dinosaur they pictured. It is called the Brontosaurus. Welcome to episode 18 of Mr. Mike's Dino-A-Day, brought to you by the Mechanicsburg Learning Center. So today's animal, let's give you a look at it. This is what we called the Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus meaning thunder lizard. Thunder lizard, great name. Almost as great as Tyrant Lizard King, Tyrannosaurus Rex, but a great name nonetheless. Only one problem. When this thing was named, everything was cool. That was back in 1879. It was discovered 3 years before in Wyoming, 1874. And the gentleman that ended up naming it, Othniel Charles Marsh, was very excited about the discovery, and the world thought it was the greatest thing ever. And the name Brontosaurus has continued to exist up until today. Unfortunately, what a long and storied and confusing past this animal has had since its first discovery. 1903 rolls around, and a gentleman named Elmer Riggs decides to take a real close look at these animals and look at the bones and just figure out why it was named Brontosaurus, because there was some discussion that it looked an awful lot like another animal called Apatosaurus. And unfortunately, Elmer came to the conclusion, at least as far as O.C. Marsh was concerned, Elmer came to the conclusion that they were in fact the same genus, the same animal, and it went back and forth and back and forth. Finally, in 2015, and this is after in the 1990s, Robert T. Backer, a famous paleontologist, said, "No, wait a second. I think that these bones are unique." But some people thought it was an Apatosaurus. Some people thought it was Brontosaurus. Some people thought they were unique. Some people thought they were the same. And when you look at the models, okay, this is Apatosaurus, but it's also Brontosaurus. Here's another example of it. Thing was about 72 feet long. Barely fits on my camera picture. But take a look at the tail. Big boy, okay? Known for its very broad, thick, muscular neck, okay? So, problem is, O.C. Marsh did not have a skull to work with. And they ended up finding a skull a mile or two down the road, and they kind of plopped that thing on it, thinking it was the same species, and it was Camarasaurus. Now, if you look at the Camarasaurus skull versus the Apatosaurus / Brontosaurus skull, you can see a huge, huge difference. All right? Nonetheless, for the world knew it as Brontosaurus, and that's what it was called. So the 1990s roll around, almost 100 years after Elmer Riggs put this doubt in folks' minds. The 1990s roll around, and Robert T. Backer says, "I think they're unique enough, and I'm going to call it Brontosaurus, and I'm going to call this species Apatosaurus." Then in 2015, another study was done. Several studies have been done on this thing. 2015, another study was done, and they said, "Yeah, we do believe that Brontosaurus was unique enough that we're going to call it Brontosaurus, and these bones we're going to classify as Apatosaurus." The funny thing is, in 1989, the U.S. Postal Service released some stamps, and they put Apatosaurus on it, and what do you think they called it? They called it Brontosaurus. Their reasoning? Most people just know it as Brontosaurus. So they were all excited about introducing these stamps, except for one other small error that they made. One of the stamps had a pteranodon on it, which is not a dinosaur. So another little mistake was made. If you would like to see the original Brontosaurus bones, you can actually see those at Yale's Peabody Museum in Connecticut. They are the bones that were named Brontosaurus, subsequently called Apatosaurus, and then renamed Apatosaurus again. So I've said when I go talk to kids at schools and child care centers and museums and all over the place, I said I may have to write a fourth book because you never know. This story is seemingly unending. So you can kind of call it what you want when you see it, Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus, because they're very, very similar. They do have that little claw on the front foot, on what we call the manus, the very front foot. See that claw sticking out? They're really not sure what that's all about. It probably was not meant for defense. It may have helped them dig for vegetation. More likely, as we discussed with another sauropod, let's call it a sauropod, not a long neck. The center of its body weight was back here, so it probably was able to get up onto trees, at least lean against trees, and they think maybe that nail, see that big bad nail, they think that nail may have helped grasp the tree a little bit when it was eating vegetation. So, from Dinorific Poetry, Volume 2, my story, the confusing story of the Brontosaurus. When Brontosaurus bones were first discovered, we felt quite sure new facts had been uncovered, for here we had a skeleton so splendid, the man that named the beast would be commended. His name was O.C. Marsh, and he suspected these bones that were retrieved and then inspected were something humans hadn't yet confronted. So, for a fitting name, he searched and hunted. The name begins with thunder. Its massive structure filled O.C. with wonder. It must have shook the ground as it went strolling. Just think about 300 bowlers bowling. Now here's why a fuss was then created. It seems that dear Bronto was just a tad belated, because 2 years before, a textbook will assure us, a bone was found that Marsh named Apatosaurus. Now, it took a couple years for folks to figure that Bronto was the same beast, only bigger. But since the name Apatosaurus came before it, that Brontosaurus name, let's just ignore it. So next time Mom or Dad proclaims it Bronto, you can gain respect from them quite pronto. Just tell them Brontosaurus isn't proper. Apatosaurus is, and it's a whopper. The Brontosaurus from Dinorific Poetry, Volume 2, by Mr. Mike, illustrated by my son, Ethan. So, the way that poem ended makes it sound like it's Apatosaurus, which is probably why I have to write a fourth book. Because now, once again, Brontosaurus has been brought back into the scientific vernacular, and we are allowed once again to refer to this beast as Brontosaurus. So if anybody asks, just say it's, Bronto Apato. We really don't know. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for sharing the videos. This is episode number 18, Dino-A-Day with Mr. Mike for the Mechanicsburg Learning Center. Signing off until tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yes, Saturdays and Sundays, every single day, just to give you something to do. For those adults that are interested, Mr. Mike's band is playing tonight live, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just go to facebook.com/enticingtunes if your parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles want to see some music that's meant for folks over 5. But you could probably enjoy it too. So thanks again. Talk to you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Dino-A-Day and Mr. Mike.